Hello, you're watching A News. I'm Dilek Tuna. Let's begin with the headlines. The body of Iran's late supreme leader lies in state in Tehran as Iran begins week of funeral ceremonies. Russia says its forces captured Kostianivka in eastern Ukraine, which Kyiv denies. And Pope Leo during Mass in Lampedusa calls for long-term plan to solve migration crisis. Iran has begun a week of funeral ceremonies for former Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, drawing large crowds to Tehran. The events are expected to continue across several cities before his burial later this week.
Thousands of mourners gathered at Tehran's Imam Khomeini Grand Mosala on Saturday as Iran began a week of funeral ceremonies for former Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The proceedings opened with the national anthem, Quran recitations and religious tributes. Khamenei's coffin, draped in the Iranian flag and topped with his black turban, was placed beside the coffins of 4 slain family members. Supporters filled the prayer complex, waving Iranian flags and carrying portraits of the former leader.
Ayatollah Khamenei was martyred by the enemies of Islam. He was a unique leader revered by Muslims as well as non-Muslims.
I
have a strange feeling. When my father died, I didn't cry as much as I cried when the Supreme Leader was martyred.
State media showed crowds chanting anti-American slogans and calling for revenge. The funeral follows Khamenei's death in February during the opening airstrike of the US and Israeli-led war against Iran. Iranian officials say representatives from about 100 countries are expected to attend memorial events, including heads of state, ministers and religious figures. Authorities have also introduced temporary flight restrictions and extra traffic measures as they prepare for large crowds throughout the week. Khamenei's coffin will remain in Tehran until Sunday evening before continuing its journey to other religious centres before his burial in Mashhad on Thursday.
A News correspondent Turaj Shireliliu brings more from Tehran's Grand Musalla prayer hall.
Reporting from streets leading to Tehran's Grand Musalla, where tens of thousands of mourners have gathered for the public farewell before the burial prayer service of Iran's former Supreme Leader Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, to be held on Sunday. The week-long processions will continue in multiple cities in Tehran and in Qom and Mashhad, as well as in neighboring Iraq, in the cities of Najaf and Karbala, home to the shrines and mausoleums of Shia Muslim saints. The Grand Ayatollah, who was killed by Israeli-US attacks in February, led Iran for about 4 decades and shaped its domestic and foreign policy longer than any political figure of his generation. On Friday, the state memorial was held with participation of heads of state, parliament speakers, ministers, and special representatives of governments here at the Tehran Musalla prayer hall. Ironically, Friday, the 3rd of July, marked the anniversary of shooting down of an Iranian commercial airliner in 1988 by the USS Vincennes, killing all 290 passengers on board, including 66 children. Iranian Foreign Ministry said in a statement that Tehran will never forget unpardonable crime, particularly after the US warship's commander received Medal of Merit. Iran and the US have deferred their mediated technical level talks to end of the funeral procession reportedly to mid-July, amid signs of progress in implementing the 60-day ceasefire agreement. Despite the lull in arms and reported advances in the talks, their verbal war continues. Parliament Speaker and Chief Negotiator in the talks with the US, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, in a post on X, harshly hit back at the US President Donald Trump's hungry nation remarks, accusing him of projecting America's own domestic challenges. He said, "Imagine having 40-something million of your own citizens on food stamps and calling another nation hungry. This is not a proclamation. This is a projection. keep your supplemental nutrition assistance program advice. Rejecting Trump's claim that Iran's unblocked assets under the truce deal will be allocated to buy American food commodities, the speaker added, "Our assets, our choices. Mind your malnutrition rates." Meantime, the week-long massive funeral rites of Ayatollah Khamenei are a demonstration of a post-war political resilience and continuity leading to the leadership of his son. Turaj Shiralilu from Tehran, Foreign News.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has met Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif in Istanbul for talks at Vahdettin Palace. The two leaders are expected to discuss bilateral cooperation, regional security and developments in the Middle East, including the Iran-US ceasefire, Gaza and Syria. The visit will also include delegation-level talks. Sharif's visit comes days after he attended the funeral of Iran's late Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei in Tehran. Russia's second city of St. Petersburg and the surrounding region came under major Ukrainian drone attacks, with a local port and oil infrastructure hit, Russian and Ukrainian authorities have confirmed. And there were also successful strikes on Kronstadt, an important military target, Ukraine's Zelensky said. Kyiv has intensified strikes on Russian energy infrastructure this year, inflicting major damage on refineries and causing gasoline shortages across the country's 11 time zones. Russia says it has captured Konstantinivka in eastern Ukraine, but Kyiv insists the city remains under its control. The competing claims come as the battle highlights why this industrial hub has become one of the most important targets in the war.
Russia says it has captured Kostiantynivka in eastern Ukraine, calling it a major strategic victory in its campaign to seize the Donetsk region. But President Volodymyr Zelensky and Ukraine's general staff reject the claim, saying Ukrainian forces continue to hold the city and its approaches. The competing claims matter because Kostiantynivka is one of Ukraine's most important defensive positions in the east. It is the southern gateway to a chain of heavily fortified cities known as the Fortress Belt, which stretches north through Druzhkivka, Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. Together, these cities form Kyiv's main line of defense across the part of Donetsk that remains under Ukrainian control. For Russia, capturing Kostiantynivka would provide a foothold to push further north and increase pressure on the rest of that defensive line. It would also move Moscow closer to President Vladimir Putin's stated goal of taking the whole Donetsk region before any eventual peace settlement. Russian forces have been trying to reach the city for months. Analysts say the advance has been slow and costly, with Ukrainian drone strikes disrupting Russian supply lines and logistics. Even so, Moscow has continued to make gradual gains, relying on its manpower advantage and repeated assaults. In recent weeks, Ukrainian commanders have acknowledged that small Russian assault groups have infiltrated parts of the city's outskirts, but say they have been prevented from establishing lasting positions or achieving an operational breakthrough. The fighting has also devastated civilian life. Before the war, Kostiantynivka was home to almost 70,000 people. Today, only around 2,000 residents are believed to remain as the front line edges closer. Whether or not Russia's latest claim proves accurate, the battle for Kostiantynivka has become one of the defining contests of the campaign in eastern Ukraine.
Rescue efforts are continuing in Venezuela 9 days after twin earthquakes devastated the country's northern coast. The death toll has climbed to at least 2,600, with more than 12,000 people injured and around 15,000 left homeless. Families in the hard-hit town of Carabaleda fear international rescue teams may soon withdraw, while many loved ones remain missing beneath the rubble. However, rescue teams are still carrying out successful rescue missions, pulling survivors from beneath collapsed buildings as the search continues. Joining me now to discuss the political and humanitarian situation in the aftermath of the twin earthquakes in Venezuela is Carlos Santaella, Venezuelan political analyst, joining us from Boston, United States. Carlos, welcome to the program.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you for having me.
Now, how bad is the situation on the ground today, and which needs are most urgent right now?
Well, Kathy, it's very well documented that there's still about 40,000 people unaccounted or missing. It's already 10 days since the earthquakes. So it's still a search and rescue, which is important, but there is a lot of people unaccounted. Then we can say that there are about 600 buildings either collapse or severely damaged. And there is about 600,000 children suffering. There's about 15,000 people without home. So the situation is dire, but let's talk about also good things. There are around 2,000 specialists, rescuer and searcher, people from 30 and 40 countries working with the Venezuelan authorities. People are saying they're not doing enough. When people say that, you have to see how vast is the geography of the search and rescue, and it's enormous. This morning I was watching a NASA satellite picture of the area, and you're talking about almost 80 kilometers end to end that you have problems and people to look for. So it is taking slowly. As you know, search and rescue always are slowly because they're human remains that you do not know if they're alive or they're dead, but you need to consider they are alive. And we're still 10 days short because I think within the window of 15 days or 2 weeks, we still have hope to find people. But the situation is very dire, but there is a lot of help trying to put this in order.
Okay, so international rescue teams and humanitarian organizations are involved. Who is helping Venezuela at this stage, and how important has this foreign assistance become, Carlos?
It's all. I was talking with somebody in the International Red Cross and this morning, and she said to me that 90% of the activities on the grounds are by foreign search and rescue teams. The others are local officials and volunteers who are helping these people with translation and also helping to move food and to bring the necessary goods to help people set up tent camps. So there is a lot of going on right now, and again, 90% of the people are on the ground. Specialized people are foreigner from over 30 countries so far.
And the government's being criticised. Is that criticism justified in your opinion? And what are Venezuelans saying about how authorities have handled this crisis?
Well, you know, if you've been in power for 25 years, that's how long the Chavez regime has been in power, of course they're going to be criticized. Because people say, you've been in charge of all this, so why we don't have better housing or better equipment, more proficient firefighters and police to preserve security? There is a lot of complaint. But you know how this works, Addy. You know, not simply because people are upset, you know, people will say the government will collapse. That doesn't work that way. One thing is to be fragile with institution, and the other thing is to be fragile politically. And politically, yes, Delcy Rodriguez right now has over a 65% unpopularity. That was the last poll I saw last night from Bloomberg. And yes, she's still there, and she's fully backed up by the US government. So today, yes, people are upset, but the US government is basically backing up an authoritarian regime today. But seeing the positive things, at least the US is there and other 30 countries and plus are there helping. And the regime, to say something positive, is allowing this to happen. Few decades ago, that wouldn't be contemplated at all. You wouldn't be seeing any foreign Marines, Navy, Coast Guards or international search and teams in Venezuela working actively, that wouldn't be possible. Today, at least, we're watching that.
And most importantly is the humanitarian crisis. So let's go back there before we wrap up. Aid workers are warning of a possible secondary health crisis here, including untreated injuries, disease risks, and pressure on hospitals. How serious is that threat, and what concerns you most going forward?
Right now, the World Health Organization and the regional office, which is PAHO, this is just the beginning. I was watching an interview, and they say that after the first 2 weeks becomes what is called septic conditions, viruses, bacteria, people unhealthy, and there's no sewage systems. Water availability is scarce. So this is a very long road that is coming ahead. I understand that the UN and the World Health Organization and the US and other countries are preventing this accordingly through international rescue protocols. But yes, this is, Kathy, this is just the beginning, and we're going to be seeing a lot of bad news, unfortunately. Again, don't forget that we're still about 40,000 people in accountant after 10 days. There will be a lot of more death, unfortunately. But yes, I believe there are going to be a lot of resources pouring into Venezuela. Try to contain this in the best way possible.
Carlos, thank you so much for joining us and updating us with the situation on the ground.
Thank you, Kari.
Large protests have erupted in eastern Germany as the far-right Alternative for Germany, or AfD, gathers for a crucial party congress ahead of September's state election. Here's more.
Around 15,000 protesters have taken to the streets of the eastern German city of Erfurt, blocking roads and staging sit-in demonstrations in an effort to disrupt the annual Congress of the far-right Alternative for Germany. Police have maintained a heavy presence following warnings of possible clashes, while authorities have urged demonstrators to remain peaceful. The AfD delegates are meeting to elect the party's leadership and prepare for key state elections later this year. Protesters say they want to prevent what they describe as the spread of fascism and stop the Congress from taking place. Many argue Germany has a special responsibility to resist the far right because of its Nazi past, a claim the AfD denies. The Congress comes as the AfD seeks to win its first ever state government in September's election in Saxony-Anhalt, where opinion polls suggest the party could secure an outright majority. A victory would mark the first time the AfD has taken power at state level. The AfD has steadily gained support across Germany since last year's federal election, when it finished second with a record 20.8% of the vote. More recent YouGov polling puts the party at 29% nationally, ahead of Chancellor Friedrich Merz's Conservative Alliance on 20%. The AfD says it represents conservative voters and supports tougher immigration policies. However, all other major parties continue to refuse to work with it under a long-standing political firewall aimed at keeping the party out of government. Meanwhile, Germany's domestic intelligence agency says right-wing extremism remains the country's biggest threat to democracy.
One of Europe's best-known migration hotspots has been the focus of Pope Leo's latest visit, as he called for greater compassion towards those forced to flee their homes. The visit also renewed attention on the human cost of the Mediterranean migration route.
Pope Leo has visited the Italian island of Lampedusa, paying tribute to migrants who died trying to cross the Mediterranean and urging European leaders to adopt a long-term plan to tackle the migration crisis. During the visit on Saturday, Pope Leo prayed in silence and laid a wreath at Cala Pisana Cemetery, where many unidentified migrants are buried after losing their lives at sea. He also visited the Porta d'Europa, or Door of Europe Memorial. Lampedusa is one of Europe's main arrival points for people fleeing war, poverty and persecution from North Africa. Around 7,000 migrants have reached the island this year after making the dangerous Mediterranean crossing from Africa to Europe. Speaking during an open-air mass, the Pope called for a long-term strategy to receive, protect, support and integrate migrants, saying those forced to flee deserve dignity and compassion. In a separate message marking US Independence Day, Pope Leo also said that defending life includes welcoming, protecting and supporting immigrants.
There are also those who choose not to be a neighbor and those who choose not to make a decision. Those who have lost their lives in this sea are victims both of decisions that were made and of decisions that were not made. Indifference to the common good and corruption in their countries of origin. A global economic system that generates poverty and exclusion. Fear that fuels prejudice and contempt.
The visit echoed Pope Francis's landmark trip to Lampedusa in 2013, when he prayed for victims who died at sea. Tareka Barhane, an Eritrean refugee who survived the journey to Italy and later founded the October 3rd Committee in memory of the 368 people killed in the 2013 Lampedusa shipwreck, welcomed the Pope's tribute.
I got chills from the emotion. I managed to send a message to Pope Leo, because being here is not just about being present. He went to the cemetery of the migrants who died, something that has not happened in 40 or 50 years. A leader who honors the people who died at sea and their families.
Migrant rights groups said the visit should encourage Italy and Europe to identify and honor those who lost their lives.
Wildfires continued to burn across southern Europe. In central Portugal, firefighters worked on Saturday to stop a wildfire reaching homes near Vozela after it spread overnight into 3 municipalities. Part of a village was evacuated and 6 people suffered minor injuries. In northeastern Spain, firefighters contained around 70% of a major wildfire after it burned more than 2,370 hectares. The blaze reached homes in Calonge, damaging properties. In southern France, a wildfire closed part of the motorway, with the region on high alert after a record-breaking heatwave. Washington DC's 4th of July parade has been cancelled because of extreme heat after the National Weather Service issued a heat warning for the US Capitol. Temperatures are expected to reach 39 degrees Celsius, with the heat index climbing as high as 46 degrees. The dangerous conditions have also disrupted other Independence Day events, including the Great American State Fair, where dozens of people were treated for heat-related illnesses. Millions of Americans remain under heat alerts as officials urge people celebrating outdoors to stay hydrated and seek shade. Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev has congratulated US President Donald Trump on the 250th anniversary of American independence. In a congratulatory letter, Aliyev said Azerbaijan-US relations are continuing to strengthen and that the Strategic Partnership Charter signed in February will expand cooperation in a range of sectors. He also thanked Trump for supporting peace efforts and regional infrastructure projects in the South Caucasus. As the US celebrates the 250th anniversary of its independence on July 4th, one exhibition in New York is offering a journey through the nation's history.
A rare copy of the Declaration of Independence, an original 13-star Revolutionary War flag, and an early portrait of George Washington are among the centerpieces of a new Sotheby's exhibition marking 250 years of American independence. Titled as a retrospective of the nation's history, the exhibition features paintings, photographs, historical documents, and cultural artifacts that explore how American identity has evolved since 1776. Visitors can also see works by renowned artists including Edward Hopper, Georgia O'Keeffe, Gordon Parks and Barclay Hendricks, reflecting both America's cultural achievements and its ongoing pursuit of equality and civil rights.
The exhibition is really an overview and a retrospective overview of 250 years of American independence. And here in this first gallery, the first chapter of the exhibition, Making of a Nation, is really putting together some iconic historical material. So we have an early portrait of George Washington painted by Gilbert Stuart. We have here in the background behind me a Revolutionary Star flag, 13-star flag that was carried in the Revolutionary Wars, as well as an incredible to-scale model of Independence Hall that was commissioned for the centennial exhibition of the American independence in 1876 in Philadelphia. We also have a Declaration of Independence, which is from the first 200 copies that were commissioned in 1820 by then Secretary of State John Quincy Adams. And those are the first 200 signed copies that were made after the original.
The exhibition runs in New York through July 16th, coinciding with nationwide celebrations of America's 250th Independence Day.
That's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for all the latest updates.